Now, the functional disconnection syndrome is well documented. It's been documented since the late 19th century in psychological journals and in neurological journals. But the problem is most people, very few people, have heard of it. And in fact, very few doctors have even heard of it. Even worse, they don't know how to recognize it, they don't know how to diagnose it, and even if they did diagnose it, they don't know what to do with it. And that's what we do, that's where we come in. We do brain-based therapy, and brain-based therapy looks at the weak side of the brain. It stimulates the weak side of the brain to get the imbalance better. We're going to go more into exactly what we do with brain-based therapy in a bit. But to really understand what's going on with ADHD and to understand why your child's having the problem, you have to understand a little bit about the left and right side of the brain. So if you understand how the brain functions when it's integrated, when it's working well, when both sides are even, the left and the right side of the brain are functioning even, you can understand what's going to happen when it's not integrated, when it's not functioning well. Because you can really think of the brain as a muscle. It's very similar to a muscle. And in some people, some muscles become very imbalanced and they can become weak. So we may have a right side that's real weak and the other side is going to become real strong. And that's exactly what happens in a functional disconnection syndrome. It's the same thing as almost having a weak muscle. Stimulate a weak muscle, give it some good nutrition. What happens to it? It becomes stronger. That's exactly what happens with exercise. That's exactly what brain-based therapy does. So let's look at the left brain versus the right brain. Let's look at some of the attributes that come from the left side of the brain versus the right side of the brain. What you'll see on the screen now is a list of those attributes. So if you look at the right side or the right hemisphere versus the left hemisphere, the right hemisphere is responsible for withdrawal responses. It's the brake pedal. It's for stopping things, stopping movement, stopping thought, whereas the left side, the left hemisphere, is the gas pedal. It's for approach responses. It's for initiating movement, initiating thought. So you can see a child with attention deficit disorder having a higher firing left brain versus the right brain. They're going to have a hard time stopping movement, stopping thought. And they're going to have a hard time not approaching other stimuli that come into their environment. So they're going to have a lack of focus. That's the hallmark of a lack of a focus, is decreased withdrawal, increased approach. The right side of the brain is for gross motor movement. It's for posture. It's for big movements. So you'll see kids with attention deficit disorder or kids with a weak right brain, they're going to have poor posture. They're going to tend to slouch in their chair and things like that. The left side of the brain controls the small motor movement, the fine motor movement. For instance, playing video games. This is why these kids tend to be very good at puzzles and video games and things like that, because their hands, the dexterity in the hands requires having good fine motor control. But a lot of times they're not the best of athletes, or their coordination is not very good because their gross muscle movements are not functioning very well. The right side of the brain likes low frequency stimulation, whereas the left side of the brain likes high-frequency stimulation. Again, like video games, computers, flickering lights, things like that. The right side of the brain is the aware part of the brain. It's for spatial skills. It's what we call the aware part of the brain. And that's why the vast majority of these kids, almost all these kids with attention problems, have horrible spatial skills. They have poor body awareness, where the left side of the brain is the what part of the brain. It likes looking at the small details, the memorization of facts. That's why these kids tend to be very good with, again, the small details. Where you look at the right side of the brain is for social skills. Being social is the right side of the brain. It allows you to look at somebody's facial expressions. It allows you to understand what they mean. It's very important. It's the non-linear, I hate to say it, it's the creative side. It's kind of the non-linear part of the brain. Whereas the left side is very linear. It's the memorization of facts and figures and things like that. The right side of the brain is for non-verbal communication, whereas the left side of the brain is for verbal communication. So non-verbal communication, looking at eyes, looking at faces, looking at bodies, things like that, being able to understand the non-verbal cues. And it's very important to understand that a child with a verbal delay, it's not always a left-sided brain problem. because it can be a right-sided brain problem because the verbal skills develop from the nonverbal skills. So as a baby, you develop these verbal skills, looking at your mom's face, understanding what that means. That has to develop before the left side can develop. So that's very important. Also, the right side of the brain loves new stimuli. It's stimulated by novel things, whereas the left side of the brain loves routines. It loves sameness. For instance, a lot of parents will tell me that their child loves to eat the same foods all the time. I mean, they are always eating the same foods. Now, a lot of that has to do with some of their food sensitivities, but again, it also has to do with the left brain. Or they'll want to watch the same TV show over and over and over again, or watch playing the same video game over and over again. That tends to drive parents crazy. The right side of the brain is for reading and math comprehension. Very important to understand that because basically it allows you, the right side of the brain, it's going to be more than just calculation. It's going to be able to do a word problem or to read something and infer what the answer would be. It's the ability to sit down and read something and remember what you read. Whereas the left side of the brain is very good. It's early academics. It's the ability to read and things like that, or the ability to know your letters and your numbers. And so a lot of these kids seem like in the first and second grade they get off to a very good start. But as they get a little older, they have a hard time with reading comprehension. So they can actually read the words, but when they get done, they have no idea what they really what they read because they can't put the big picture together. The right brain is the big picture. It looks at the forest. It puts the whole thing together, whereas the left brain is the details. It's like looking at the trees instead of the forest. Very important to understand that. So again, left hemisphere is the approach, right hemisphere is withdraw, left hemisphere is the gas pedal, right hemisphere is the brake pedal. Again, left hemisphere initiates thought, it's the what part of the brain, memorization, love sameness, and routine. So you can see very quickly what happens when you get a right side of the brain that's not working very well, and when a left side becomes dominant. You get a child that likes TV, loves video games, loves computers, likes sameness, may not want to go outside and play as much, maybe not as coordinated as you'd like them to be. They're into routines, they're into rituals, they have a great memory for the things that they like. They almost always have poor social skills, and they have a lack of the ability to focus and to concentrate. They may have temper tantrums. And the trouble is they just can't control themselves because the gas pedal's on and the brake pedal's not on. So, that's a hallmark of a brain that's out of balance, and balance is the key. So the bottom line is one side of the brain becomes very dominant and the other side of the brain becomes neglected. And over time, if that neglect is not corrected, the neglect is almost never going to get better, and most of the time it's going to get worse and persist into adulthood. So basically what happens is the brain becomes out of sync with itself. The left and the right side of the brain are really not working together. They're working independently from each other, and that causes a whole host of problems. It causes the attention deficit. It causes the hyperactivity. Causes all those right brain issues. Even Asperger's syndrome and autism are right brain issues. So what I'd like to do now is I'd like to have you watch another testimonial. This is a young girl that we treated in our office. Her name is Selah. She came in and she was dealing with ADD, and she had hyperactivity as well. So she really had ADHD. So you can watch that, and then after we're through, what I'm going to do is we're going to talk about treatments. We're going to talk about the traditional treatments, and we're also going to talk about brain-based therapy treatments.